Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Me in my garden? Well, I want to talk to you about how this year I grew over 400 pounds of fruits and vegetables, saved over $1,000 from my grocery bill. I want to talk to you about what crops delivered the most pounds, what crops were the ones that were the most consistent with delivering on food. I want to talk to you about the lessons I learned this year. I'll talk to you about the highs, the lows, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if you're looking for some inspiration, motivation, and some tips to take into the new year and as you plan your vegetable garden, this is the video for you. Let's start first with what worked. What were the successes? What were the things that if you were going to take some tips into your vegetable garden, here would be the things that I felt were the most effective at driving hundreds and hundreds of pounds, over $1,000 of savings from my garden. And one of the first things is that we continue to focus on the things we eat. You may be like me, I watch other people, I look at what they put in their garden. There are so many interesting, fascinating, tasty things that you could be growing in your garden. And in Florida, the list is even longer because we can grow what northerners grow, but we can also grow things that grow out in the Caribbean and in Africa and South America. Like there's so many things we could grow. Oranges, bananas, papayas, but also strawberries and tomatoes and lettuces. I mean, we have got like some of the longest, best list of things that we can grow. But what I've learned and what was really drove a lot of success this year is I kept it simple and focused on what I eat. Not what I could grow, but what I can grow that I will 100% definitely eat. So one of the first things that I think led to a lot of success in this growing season was that I learned the lessons from past years. And that first lesson was focus on what you eat. See, in past years, we've actually grown more food than we grew this year. But the challenge is we had too much of things. It's not that we didn't eat them, we just didn't eat that much of it. In particular, we had way too many papayas. We had way too many carrots. We eat papayas, we eat carrots, but we just had way too much of it. Have you ever had this? Or maybe you're at the beginning and you're just like, I can't even get stuff to grow yet. So one of my tips for you guys, and one of the things I continue to take forward, is focus on the things that you're gonna eat and that you're gonna eat a lot of. While you can grow lots of interesting, rare fruits, wild varieties of vegetables, if you're not gonna eat a lot of it, taking up a good chunk of dedicated space is probably not the best use of your garden. So this year, what I did is I really doubled down on just focusing on the things I knew we would eat a lot of, which is why we only grew 20 crops this year. In past years, our list was way longer, but I kept it narrow and I said we will grow these 20 things and we will grow them well. And I feel like that led to a lot of success because we did that. One of the things I wanted to get really good at this year and really make sure we produced a lot of was tomatoes. Tomatoes is one of those things that we eat it fresh. We eat it in salsas, we eat it in soups, we eat it in spaghetti sauces, pizza sauces. Like it has a whole wide range of things that we eat it in, but we do eat a lot of it fresh. But one of the things I needed to do differently from the year before is I had way too many of small varieties. Like I really had a lot more of those Everglades tomatoes, grape tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. And while 100% you should consider growing those, they work so well here in Florida. The challenge is when you have a lot of small, and I mean like a lot, like a lot of small tomatoes. They're not really great for processing. They're great for salads. They're great for snacking on, but at a certain point you can only snack so much and you want stuff for a meal. And using them for things like salsas and pasta sauces, you can do it. I did it, but it wasn't as efficient, it wasn't as effective. So I wanted to focus in on varieties that were a little bit meatier, a little bit bigger, and that's why this year I really focused in on two types of tomatoes. And that was 4th of July tomatoes and Cherokee tomatoes. I tried both purple Cherokee and chocolate Cherokee. First up, 4th of July tomatoes. This is a tomato that I had success with before, and boy oh boy, I finally cracked the code on my seed starting. I finally figured out all the things I needed to have in place, and I got a ridiculous amount of 4th of July tomatoes. So many 4th of July tomatoes. Too many maybe too many? I'm not quite sure. I kind of go back and forth. And we'll get to a lesson I learned for the like feeling like it was too much at certain points. We got over 50 pounds of just 4th of July tomatoes, just those ones. I was constantly harvesting them, and they all came in like 2-3 months. It was crazy in my front yard trying to keep on top of all that harvest. But by keeping away from tons and tons of different varieties and focusing on just a few, which was 4th of July, purple Cherokees, and Everglades tomatoes, I was able to be way more effective with my harvest. With purple Cherokees, this was a newer one, and this is one of the things I continue to do that I think is an effective skill, is that while you want to focus on things that you know you're going to use, you should leave a small amount of space for trying new things. This was a new variety for me this year. It was one that had been recommended before to me, and I tried it, and I tried it as a transplant. I didn't even try starting it from seed. I just bought one. And this led to an amazing harvest with just a couple plants. I like this one because it was much more meaty. It's a larger tomato. It did really well in the spring season, which is actually the more challenging season for our tomatoes. And it got me really optimistic for continuing to growing tomatoes for the fall season, which is actually what I started, were purple Cherokee, Cherokee purple, pick your way of saying it. Those tomatoes have been really great at starting, and I'm looking forward for us to get giant, juicy tomatoes when it's a little cooler out. The next thing that led me to be really successful this year is continuing to go with what works. And one of those things was Everglades tomatoes. Everglades tomatoes have been doing a really good job for me when I was a novice. They did well for me as I got better at gardening, and they did amazing for me as I've gotten more expertise. And doubling down on varieties that work here continues to be something that I would recommend you guys do, is focus on varieties that you know work for you. Some varieties can work for all of us, like Everglades tomatoes, and there are other varieties that they work for some people, they don't for others. Maybe it's more North Florida, maybe it's more South Florida, maybe you have the right kind of soil, maybe you have to have the right amount of fussing you want to do at the plant. And I don't mean that you're too fussy, because some plants like Everglades tomatoes actually prefer you don't fuss at them. And people who tend to be a little bit more hands-on struggle with that. And people who are busy and might do well with Everglades tomato might be struggling because they're with a tomato that needs a little bit more TLC. You know what I'm saying? So finding that variety that works not only in your garden, but also for your lifestyle, that's what I'm all about. Now, I tend to stick with varieties that are more hands-off. It's kind of my style. I love an efficient, effective, low maintenance plant. Now, my next thing that I would recommend doing that I have found also really helpful is not just simplifying which crops, but also simplifying varieties. Tomatoes was one of the few crops that I actually did multiple varieties. It was that and lettuce and broccoli. And I think with everything else, I had my one variety and I went with it. And I found that to be really helpful for a couple reasons. One is that when I was dealing with different varieties, timing sometimes became a challenge, but also how you use them. And what I was finding with having too many types of crops and too many types of varieties is I wasn't getting enough of any one thing to really do stuff with it. Maybe it would make a meal here or there, but having multiple meals across weeks, or having enough to go and freeze, can, dry, whatever, I needed more. So by simplifying and streamlining everything to fewer crops, fewer varieties, I was able to be way more effective with my harvest. That was some of the things I noticed from past years, was that a lot more stuff ended up in the compost because we just had too little of anything at a time. So it wasn't enough for a dish. It might be enough for a garnish, but I mean, how many lettuce leaves are you garnishing your meals with? It just, it wasn't enough. So what I would recommend, based on my lessons, is less crops, less varieties, and try to just get more of a few things. That you might find is a lot better. If you don't, I'll qualify that. If you don't have acres and acres, you got tons of land, go for it. Put all the things in, try all the things. But if you have limited space, you're a backyard gardener, front yard gardener, side yard gardener, you have a limited number of beds, fewer is actually I found way more effective than having lots of everything. My 2 cents. But this can lead to a challenge, because if you do this strategy, you might end up with these big bumper crops. I was telling you, the tomatoes, right? Had so much start coming in all at once. And the problem is I had a little bit of a plan, but not a good enough plan. I didn't have a good enough plan for doing so well. And I feel like that's like one of the things, like in the beginning, you start doing vegetable gardening and it's a real big struggle to get anything to grow. And then you turn this corner and now you have way too much all of a sudden. Or it's not too much, you just can't manage it because there's just like, this year I was doing better with tomatoes and I was like, yay. But now I want you to think about this. Imagine you come home from work, you're doing your weekend chores, you harvest your tomatoes, it's like 20 pounds. You're like, wow, I could can something. And then the next week, and you have to hold off because you know life is happening, and then you come back the next weekend and midweek to kind of harvest, and all of a sudden you're realizing you're ending up with like another 20 pounds of tomatoes, and then another like 15, and all of a sudden it's spring break, you're trying to do stuff with your kids, maybe you're going on a trip, and you've got 50 pounds of tomatoes in your fridge. What are you doing? And this was me this year. I ended up with so many tomatoes. We ended up with about 150 pounds of tomatoes, and it all came in about 9 weeks. It was so much. And in the beginning, I really struggled to deal with it. Because at first we're just like using fresh tomatoes, we're throwing them on salads as they come in, and then we have so much. But this is where my lesson learned and my recommendation is have recipes ready to go. Have things that you want to try, especially canning stuff. Like, does it use 5 tomatoes or does it use 5 pounds of tomatoes? That is very different. So I was able to pull together a bunch of things. I pulled together canning recipes and recipes with varying levels of like use that I was interested in using. And that way, as all this came in, I was able to can so much salsa, tomato sauce, bruschetta, along with eating tons of it fresh. So one of the things I'm definitely taking to the next year is I'm gonna be looking at my key crops like tomatoes, lettuces, onions, that I'm going to plan to have a lot of it. And I'm probably gonna have time periods where like a lot comes in suddenly. And I'm going to have a game plan so that if I end up with 20 pounds and I need to do something with a lot of it quickly, I'm ready to go with recipes to make my fridge empty faster. Now, one of the lessons I've learned over and over again, and now I, even as someone, you might say she's a pro gardener. I don't think I'm a pro gardener, but you might feel like I'm a pro gardener. And I'm gonna tell you right now, there is no shame in buying transplants. Some great successes I had this year were because I bought transplants. For trying new varieties, because my timing was off, because life is lifing and I just couldn't get around to seed starting in time. I didn't have the right seeds in time because sometimes it just, look, life happens. Sometimes you don't have stuff. Also, if you're not familiar with a crop, like I've done that before, is like, I'm just gonna buy the starts because like learning the seed starting thing, the transplant, all the other stuff you gotta learn for a plant, like I'm just skipping ahead, right? We're just gonna jump the board and just move forward. Some huge winners I had this year were because I just went and bought transplants. You know that, we've already talked about that. The other one was peppers. All my pepper seeds had gone bad. And so I was like, what am I doing with peppers? And now you may say, you went to the local nursery. No, I went to a Home Depot, I went to Lowe's, and I bought banana peppers. Banana peppers made a ridiculous amount of food in my garden. And yes, they were the ones from Home Depot and Lowe's. I can't remember which store. I feel like I went to both. Regardless of which one it was, yes, those ones from the store. I know a lot of people will tell you should never buy stuff from there, but there are times where it makes sense to buy stuff from there. I'm not saying that they're always right for all the things that they have there, and there's a lot of challenges if you just go and buy things there, but if you buy it at the right time and you get the right varieties, there are things that work there. And banana peppers, and I'm not the only one, other Floridians even said in the comment section that yeah, they grabbed the banana peppers from a Home Depot or Lowe's or Ace Hardware, and bam, they've just got so many peppers. And let me tell you, peppers, hands down, when we look at the year, when I was looking through my planner at all my harvests, it was the one that produced not the most amount of pounds, but it was the most consistent across many months. It produced food 7 months out of the year. And prior to that, we bought Cubanelle peppers from Home Depot, and they had produced for, I think, 15 consecutive months right here in Zone 10. So do not, all my new people who are like, I shouldn't buy anything from the store, go ahead, buy some stuff from the store. I have videos, and I will continue to make videos where I will go to the Home Depots, the Lowe's, and I will show you things that are worth spending the money if you're gonna spend money on transplants. It's not everything, but there's definitely stuff. You can just go pick it up. or go to a local nursery and pick it up, and then just like get some stuff in the ground, get tons of pounds, get some success happening for you. And then you can do all the seed starting stuff. If you're thinking seed starting, how'd that go? What do you think about that? I feel like this year, what I did really well in preparation for seed starting this year is I really allowed myself to accept. It was definitely one of those years, like I did what I said. Past years, I was kind of trying to finagle around it, but I accepted the fact that summer is summer in Florida. It's hot, it's miserable, no one wants to be outside. Even though your garden looks cute or beautiful or there's weeds growing, like just accept that summer is kind of awful. And I really leaned into planning, prepping, and getting ready for fall seed starting. And I feel like this year, last year, I continue to be more and more successful with getting seed started. This is not a skill that I was good at a few years ago, and it's something I feel like I've gotten really good at. Look at them, they're back here. I'm getting really good at it. Now, hurricanes have made it a bit challenging to keep my seedlings alive. So there's that. But this year, I feel like more than other years, I have been most prepared for the fact that I'm gonna lose all my seedlings to things that are outside my control. So I feel like a big win is that accept summer for what it is. Don't try to push yourself through it. Summer's just awful. For gardening in Florida. I really don't like gardening in the summer. The rest, 3 quarters of the year, I'm love being out here. But summer, I'm just like, no thank you. The sun's too intense. But in the vein of seed starting, one of the things I felt like went really well was at the beginning of this year is I'd spent a lot more time instead of seed starting trays is doing direct sowing into the beds. And that led to an amazing successes, specifically with lettuce, beets, and carrots. I had such amazing harvests with all 3 of those crops. And I feel like it was just, it kind of was like the easy button, because those crops combined with the fact that we had an El Nino winter where there was just like a lot more rain made my life so much easier. Not worrying about like up potting, transplanting, all this. I just like had it right in the beds and it worked so well. And I would encourage you, if you've been always all about the transplant, is considering doing more seeding directly in place, or seeding in place combined with starting in a seed tray, because I feel like that was definitely for the win. And going into next year, I'm definitely thinking about how I'm going to do more starting seeds in the bed earlier so that I can do less fussing at vegetables. The other thing that went really well this year is really leaning into, like we talked about earlier, right? Like focus on those things that you eat a lot of. But sometimes the thing you eat a lot of, it can grow here, but maybe it's just like a little bit challenging. And one of those things for me was spinach. Spinach continues to be one of those things that, I mean, really this year I was just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not even trying. Y'all gave me some really great tips recently. I feel like in one of the fall planning videos, so many fabulous tips for you guys, because I leaned into just finding an alternative. That's one of the cool things about Florida is we can grow so many things that we don't necessarily have to worry about fussing at certain plants. So I leaned into, for what I needed with spinach, I just leaned into beet leaves, sweet potato leaves, and of course kale. And this was one of the new things I tried growing from seed by myself, was dino kale, and it worked out great. We had plenty of kale throughout winter and spring, basically until we cleared out the beds in summertime. And I just would encourage you, if you're using things like spinach for smoothies and stuff like that, there's like so many alternatives that you could be doing here in Florida. So you should do them. Okay, another lesson that I learned this year was not to give up, especially on your seed starts. Some of your seeds, your little baby plants, they can handle way more neglect and abuse than you can think. Specifically, last year, at the end of the year, I started my tomatoes, especially my 4th of July tomatoes. They came up great, they looked beautiful. And then stuff happened in life and they got so bad. And I remember it was like Thanksgiving time. And I just was like, you know what? I'm gonna shove them in the ground and then they'll probably die. And then I'll just restart seeds after kind of the holidays and just go with it. And these seedlings looked awful. And I ignored them. I just totally ignored them after I shoved them in the ground. And then I just focused on the holidays. And then we went on a vacation. And I just came back from the vacation. And I looked at those plants and I went, oh my gosh, I think they're actually doing okay. And I didn't restart seedlings. And these were actually, And like I told you, right, I had a few holes that I filled in with purple Cherokee, and these seedlings, those were the 4th of July. They looked so awful. Hopefully I can find some old footage of me putting them in the ground, and hopefully you can see how awful they look. And yes, those are the ones that produced over 50 pounds. Those awful looking plants. Did some of them die after I put them in the ground? Yes, but some of them lived. And my lesson was, is like, you know what? Even if half of them die, you already put in the time into these ones. So we might as well just take, 10 minutes, go shove them in the ground, and then who knows what can happen. And I use that same mindset even this year when we had the hurricanes hit. Had so many seedlings between Helene and Milton. If you guys didn't see, our neighborhood flooded. We evacuated multiple times. We couldn't be back at our house. My seedlings, while I started them well, while they were growing well, they all became mostly garbage by the end. And so I shoved them in the ground. And this year, I told my members, I was like, hey, at a minimum, I'm just getting myself motivated, get them out there. You never know what happens. And shockingly, they all died. Hey, it all doesn't end with a happy ending. But what it did do is it got me motivated just to get going post-hurricane. And that's one of the things I would tell you is that in Florida, it's never too late. It's never too late. I hear all the time from people like, oh, I thought it was too late for me to start a garden. You can start a garden any month of the year here in Florida. Any month of the year. January, February, March, all the way through December. You might not be able to start the thing you want to start, but there's always something you can grow. There's always, at a minimum, a vegetable or 2 or 3 or 10 that you could be growing every single month of the year. That's why I always put out those garden guides for you guys, because hey, life happens, or you're busy, or there was too much work, or you had a baby, or whatever, and now is the month that you want to start. This isn't like you live over in New York or Chicago or Michigan or Indiana. You live in Florida, which means at any time of the year, you can wake up and say, I want to start a garden today. I want to grow some food, and you can. So I just used that opportunity to get myself just going post Milton and just get seed started again. I got my seedlings out of the way. I put them in the ground. I said, Godspeed, let's see what happens. They all died, but by the time they all died, I had already restarted new seeds and was motivated to keep going. And now, look, I've got tons of seedlings going. I might be a little bit behind, but who cares? I'm going, I'm doing, and it's okay if you miss out on timing. Just keep going. That's the thing in Florida, just keep going. And it continues to remind me that persistence, resilience are the #1 skills for gardening and success. Another thing that worked really well for me this year, and it's actually worked the last few years, and I highly encourage you if you're on the beginner side or you're not, if you buy green onions from Publix, Target, Walmart, please just go ahead, take the scraps, the bottoms, the roots, and just put them in the ground. I do it all the time. We had a ton of scraps that we bought because I don't remember what happened. I think I refilled beds. Who knows? And then I planted them, and then we had so much green onions. So many green onions. And then when I harvested them from the fall so that I could move them, I had them still. And while I lost a bunch of them, how many pounds? You buy $1 worth of green onions, you buy one bunch, it's like $1, $1.50, $2. You're gonna get a whole nother bunch, and then another, and then another, and then another, and you didn't buy any new ones. And then you can have them go on and on and on. It is one of those crops that can potentially grow year round for you, especially in my zone 10s, my zone 9s, if you kind of put them in the right places. But for me, that has been a continued easy success. It's just green onion scraps. And it's one I like to work with. I do volunteer work at my kids' school, and I help them with a garden. And it's one of those easy ones that I like to teach kids because it's so easy. Just try it. If you haven't tried it yet, try it. It's so easy. And green onions, it can be thrown in everything. Anything you want to put onions in, you can throw green onions in. You can use it to just season or add a lot of flavor. Get yourself some green onion scraps. Throw them in the ground. But yeah, that saved us a lot of money. Again, we like making green onion scallion soup. It's a really nice, especially if you guys are in the winter time, it's a really nice, hearty, warm soup that you can be eating. Fills you up, keeps you warm, keeps you through the 50s in Florida. Have you guys tried any of these green onion scrap projects, or like lettuce scraps? I think there's a few others that you can grow from scraps. Let me know which ones you start. Which would you say is the easiest one to start if you're starting by scraps? Okay, so a lot of this has been vegetable talk, but let's talk a tiny bit about fruit. One of the things that we have continued to do really well on, if you want to do really well on it too, is bananas. Bananas is that fruit that it's so easy to grow. Once you get it going, man, you just can keep it going, especially in zone 10 where I live. And we just so many pounds, hundreds, over 100 pounds easy of bananas that we had this year. Some of it coming in the middle of the hurricanes, which was a little bit stressful and challenging to try to harvest stuff, throw it in the garage, like cross your fingers, you're not gonna flood, come back, you don't have power, but all of the bananas are ripe, and it's like, what are we doing with all this right now? That was my life in between Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. It was me scrambling to deal with bananas, like multiple racks of bananas. But we get over 100 pounds of bananas with just a couple banana plants, and you can do the same thing too. That is one of the things I would do if you're thinking about growing food, is really do have a hard think, specifically about bananas. I lean into this a lot, not because I'm discouraging you from all the tropical fruiting trees, but it's just, I know so many people, like, bananas are in their diet, and it's one of those things that, you know, if you live somewhere else, most of the country can't grow bananas. It's interesting to see lots of people are trying, but here in Florida, like, it can be, especially Central and South Florida, it can be so easy, set and forget, minimal maintenance, and you can get so much food from them. Maybe not the first year, but your second year, third year. And that can make your life easier if you're not doing all this like fussing that we have to do with all the veggies, right? Like, we're like constantly, like, every month dealing with something with them. But the bananas, honestly, I mean, like every few months I go over, like, I clean them up a little bit, and then I go and harvest from them. I mean, it's not a lot of effort. So I would consider doing bananas. And that really brings me to what was the biggest harvest I had this year. It was tomatoes and bananas. And actually by pounds, they were about 60% of what we grew from a pound standpoint. Now, you shouldn't just focus on pounds. Let me be clear. Don't just focus on pounds, because things like lettuce don't weigh a lot. Like, if you harvest a pound of lettuce in a week, which we did many, many weeks, it's a lot of lettuce. Like, it's a lot of lettuce, a lot of beet leaves. Like, if they're just a couple ounces, green onions, like, you don't need a lot for it to save you a lot of money, but it won't equal a lot of pounds. So you got to kind of, like, especially if you want to save on the grocery bill, because, like, you can have 100 pounds of bananas. It won't save you 100 pounds. Or not 100 pounds. It won't save you $100 at the grocery store. So it doesn't save us a lot of money, but it does make a lot of, like, food. And then over here, we got, like, lettuce, which is not a ton of pounds, but it saves us a lot of money. So we try to have, like, a good mix of saves us a lot of money, gets us a lot of pounds, and those combined together, you know, they're making us successful. What has been making you successful this year? Like, which varieties, which tricks and tips, what things are, like, making your garden work, making your life easier, making you feel good about the food that you grow? Now we're gonna talk about what didn't work. Because I'm gonna just tell you the good stuff, like, oh, I grew all this food and everything was perfect, and I'm perfect, and everything happens perfect here. Because it doesn't. See, you can grow hundreds and hundreds of pounds and make tons and tons of mistakes. And I made lots of mistakes. I have had to deal with the fact, because we can grow food year round, it can get a bit overwhelming here in Florida, because you never really get a break. I talked about this with my cousin. She gardens over in Minnesota. Totally different, right? And she was like, I never realized until I watched some of your videos that it can be really stressful to never have a break from the garden. And summertime can be one of those really stressful times. It's hot, it's humid, and the sun is so intense. And even though you know what you should be doing, it sucks to be outside. Okay, I'm just saying, it sucks to be outside. So while I knew, and I was coming to terms more with accepting, like, hey, take it easier over the summer, I took it maybe too easy. I didn't prioritize the right things, and I didn't do the good practices I knew I should have. Like, one, cover crops. I knew what cover crops I could do. I had the seeds for the cover crops I could do. And then I just never put them in the beds. So I got a lot of weeds in my beds. Enjoy me. Like, so sometimes you know the right things, and you just don't want to do it because the weather is just awful. And that was one of the challenges I had, and that's kind of one of the things I continue to struggle with is summer. I just don't want to be outside. I really don't like it. And I think the other challenge that I need to figure out is, look, I'm not going to try to grow all the things over summer. I've come to terms with that. Definitely not going to do that. But I do struggle with the fact of, like, the easiest time sometimes to do things is when I need to be in prime time mom mode. I have 2 kids, special needs, and I need to be, like, with them, especially when they're not at school or camp. And a lot of times they can't go to camps. So in the evening time, there's a lot of very specific things, which would be the ideal time to garden. If you have that flexibility, evening. Someone made the suggestion like post 5-6 o'clock is like ideal. It's even better than morning. I tested it this summer. Agree. Evening is. The challenge was just like, I just couldn't get enough evenings to do all the stuff I was supposed to do. So stuff happens. It didn't work out well. And so the pain that I had to suffer, especially going into fall, was that I had way more weeds to deal with than I would have if I would have cover cropped, or if I would have just stayed on top of pulling weeds over the summer. So that didn't go well. But if you were in a similar situation, just know like it's not unusual. It's not just you. Is it you? It's me. It's both of us, right? It's okay. But when I look back and what I would want to do differently around it is like if I would have figured out how to put that in plan maybe a little bit earlier, maybe like prep somehow more in the May, June before it got too obnoxious out. Maybe even like more April, May, because right before the kids are out of school. Do some things to make summer a little bit more manageable, get that stuff prepped so that I can like just transplant some stuff and then forget it. Because my front beds didn't have the weed problems like the back beds, because the front beds have rosella in them and they had sweet potatoes in them. So I had the cover crop. So the amount of weeds I got in there, minimal, but because I didn't have that going on back here, no bueno. So that led to my fall prep taking way longer, which then rolled into hurricanes. So that was one of the things I would like to figure out a little bit better, because it kind of just had this domino cascading effect. You guys have anything like that? Let me know. Make me not feel so alone in this front. Oh, and speaking of fall prep, yes, someone called it out a year ago when I was filling these beds, and they're like, you're not putting any logs or mulch on the bottom. And I didn't have access to them at the time. Man, this year, so many logs I have access to, but now I've got soil on top. But the amount of drop I had in my beds, in addition to pulling all those weeds, it just slowed everything down. It slowed everything down with filling the beds back up, because I had to order soil. And that's where I made the next big mistake, is I used this brand that I felt like was gonna do better, but the bags were too heavy. So while it was more cost effective and it's better soil, it was just too heavy. And honestly, going back, when I have to like top them off next year, I'm gonna go for the less efficient bags, because look, my kids are between 45 and 65, 70 pounds. And I struggle to lift these. Like, look, y'all know, I'm lifting the arches, I'm building walls, and I was struggling to lift these bags. And so it slowed me down a lot. So don't do that. Don't buy heavy stuff. And I'm not really sure what I can do now. I've thought about like, should I dig the beds out and put more logs at the bottom? That just seems like so much work. And I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. You can't make me. So if you have like 17-inch or higher beds, definitely put logs, or if not logs, mulch, like get chip drop. I've used their mulch like all the time. You see them in videos and whatnot. It's free, or you can just like pay them a service fee. Paying the service fee makes them come faster, trust me. I tested it this year. I did a load where I didn't offer to tip or anything, and it took weeks. And as soon as I put like $40 down, it was like a day or two. And I was like, oh, sorry to hear. So, and that was pre-hurricanes, before everyone and their mom like had like everything out here. Okay, so the next thing that didn't go well, that I already kind of talked about it, which was that pounds and pounds of food like coming in too fast and not having a plan. And what that has led to in past years, and it did lead to a bit this year, not as badly as past years. I feel like I got better this year, but still not great, was when the harvest comes in fast, until I pivoted, I mean, we just had to let tomatoes go bad. I know no one wants to hear that because people struggle to grow tomatoes, but like I did, I couldn't keep up with it. And so we had to just dump stuff into the compost bin. Now, I did pivot pretty quickly. I mean, it took me like a week or two because I just didn't know. I mean, there was just so much. And at first I was like, hey, does anyone want tomatoes? To my neighbors and my family and friends. And people would be like, yeah, I'll take like 3 tomatoes. And then I started getting into the habit of just being like, oh, do you want a pound of tomatoes? And if they said yes, I would go, how about 2? So once I started doing that, that I think helped them because they thought like, oh, you just, you know, like, I don't want to take too much for your harvest. And then they understood the quantity. Now, everyone that I said, do you want a pound or two? Almost everyone accepted the additional. Only my immediate next neighbors were like, we'll just take 5. And I was like, 5? You want more? But they have just a different diet. But other people like Tara and Ryan, like they made fresh tomato soup. Cliff made a tomato pie. I mean, so there were a lot of people. And then my parents and my in-laws, just salads. They gave them away to some of their friends. So we were able to pivot, I feel like, quicker, but it did have like a timeline. So I guess my tip for you guys is like, if you're going to offer to neighbors when you're getting overwhelmed, like, don't just say like, do you want some? Like, be more specific. Like, hey, do you want 2 pounds of mangoes? Do you want 5 pounds of papaya? Because sometimes then, and they can always bring it down. Because if they're like, and you're like, well, if you just want a couple, but then it can help people who, especially if they want to make like a fresh whatever that takes a lot, they won't feel bad that you're trying to offload. Like, they won't feel bad asking for a lot because they can tell you're trying to offload a lot, if that makes sense. Okay, this has happened to me, like, I feel like third time's a charm, third time's a failure. I don't know. Strawberry starts and packaging. This is I'm notorious for this. I order my bare root strawberries and then I'm not blaming you guys, but because I film stuff, I'm like, oh, this day I'll film it. I left it in packaging. And 3 times in the last probably 18 months, I have had bare root strawberries totally raw in packaging because I didn't open it up. And so you see, while I'm trying to blame you, it's really a me problem because I didn't open the packages up. I did one time this year. It was pre-hurricanes, and then all those starts died in the middle of the hurricanes because hurricanes, evacuating, flooding, right? You know, like, we all understand why that happened. And I'm sorry. I want to apologize to you guys right now for trying to blame you. It's not really you. It is really me. I know I have to hold stuff sometimes, but I continue to have this problem where I try to start the strawberries on film and I hold them too long. And I feel like one of the things I'm going to do next year is I might not show you guys some of it because I just need to get my starts right. So, and the challenge is if I'm doing 2 varieties, I'm waiting for the second package to come in. So even though I order them at the same, look, these are just a very specific problem that you should not have this problem, but it is a problem I have, and I am owning it in front of you. So if you're wondering what happened to all those strawberry starts we've watched you start, that is what has been happening to those strawberry starts that you saw me start, is that I have problems getting them out of the package in time in order to get them in soil. Okay, this next one, it's something I'm not good at, but I don't know that I really want to get good at. And that's okay. Sometimes there's things we just don't want to get good at. And that is growing food in pots. I, in general, look, I'm a in the ground, in a bed, on an arch kind of lady. I don't have acres of land. I know it can look like that at times. I really don't have that much space. I live in the city of St. Pete. I do not have an acre. I don't even have a half acre. Still big. I'm not saying it's small. I'm just saying it looks way bigger than it is. So I don't really have the need to grow in pots. And that's one of the things is like, if you don't need to do a thing, then why are you doing a thing? And for me, I don't need to grow in pots. And so I'm not good at growing stuff in pots. And so when I do get around to throwing a couple plants here and there in a pot, I just don't really. So what I wasn't good at this year, it was growing stuff in pots, because I would kind of just like haphazardly be like, oh, I'll throw something in there. And you might say, Jacqueline, I didn't see you do that this year. Because I didn't film it. I just did it. And then I was like, oh, life is happening. That's not important to me. And I just didn't pay attention. So for me, pots. I'm not very good at growing stuff in pots. I don't plan on getting good at growing stuff in pots. I am okay with not being good at growing stuff in pots. Are you good at growing stuff in pots? I might try to do a few things in pots. Not too much though. Not too much. But you can grow stuff in pots. I feel like you have to fuss at them more. That's my main thing. I don't like fussing at plants too much. But what I do think I did well is I accepted that I wasn't good at pots come fall, and I just dumped all the soil into beds as I refilled and just stacked them, especially because hurricanes were coming. And I was like, why am I trying to manage these things that are not of value to me at the end of the day? So I guess what the lesson is I'm not saying don't grow stuff in pots. I'm just saying, remember what's important to you and let go of things that aren't important to you. So if you had thought, hey, I'm gonna try this new variety, plant, crop, putting it in pots, green stalks, I don't know, whatever, and it's not really a priority, just let it go. It's okay. Okay, the other thing that didn't work this year is sweet potatoes. What do you mean, Jacqueline? They didn't grow well? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they are driving me nuts. I grew them in the bed up front and they are now like weeds up there. And I am constantly pulling vines, constantly pulling leaves, and yes, even pulling random sweet potatoes. They are so frustrating. I'm over sweet potatoes. I said to Ben, I don't know if I'm growing sweet potatoes this coming year. I am just at this point, not that we don't eat them, not that they aren't a crop that's important to us, but at this point I'm just kind of annoyed with them. So I don't know if I'm growing them this year. So it didn't work for me. I got a really giant big one. Yep. But sometimes a plant can annoy you. Any plants that annoy you, that one's annoying to me right now. And I'm just kind of over it. And then one of my other big challenges was up front. Shade again. I don't know. Mr. Cliff's oak grew, a pine, something. I don't know. It just seemed like we just had too much shade once we hit the back half of the year. And I just struggled with it. But then the hurricanes came and thinned everything out. So I guess that one's kind of resolved, but it is one of the reasons why I have let go of having a papaya up front is because, our papaya fell. Actually, not because of the hurricanes. It fell before the hurricanes. It just got too heavy. And we harvested 40, 50, 40 pounds, 30 pounds. We harvested a lot of papayas. And then the tree, it tipped over. So they can grow a lot. And it was creating too much shade up front. So I'm okay with it being gone. The cassia that was giving shade, I'm glad stuff, less shade. But what isn't working for you? What do you want to get better at? What kind of things have been frustrating this year? What do you want it to be better and different next year? Let me know. Okay, so we talked about what worked. We talked about what didn't work. But what do we want to take into the future? What are kind of the main things that are going to make us successful this coming year? And here is what I'm going to focus on. Number one, I'm going to keep it simple. Simple crops, simple varieties, focus on things that definitely have worked for me before, varieties that have worked before, processes that have worked before. I am doubling down on all of those things. Section 2, number 4, I don't know what we're in. The next thing is I'm going to start a little bit earlier. I'm going to continue to create buffer and contingencies because hurricanes happen and I know certain things are going to be challenging in life that have nothing to do with gardening at certain times of year, and I can plan around that. So as I look into this coming year, as I plan out the full year, I'm going to definitely be putting in plans to take into the fact that I know transitioning from school year into summer is always challenging. I know we're going to have hurricanes. You know you're going to hate summer and you're not going to want to do anything, so try to get ahead of that. I'm going to try to build that into the plan earlier because I know these things are going to happen. The other thing is I'm going to continue to learn from the lessons of the past. I'm going to leverage. I took so much time these last few years to document and plan. I'm going to take those lessons in the future. I'm going to fill out my planner much further in advance. I usually only do once a season, but I'm going further this year. I'm going to be putting out a rough skeleton plan for the whole year so that I can be even more successful next year. And I'm just going to keep refining what I know works. I'm going to continue to listen to other experts. I'm going to continue to listen to you guys because there's a lot of expertise in this group on things that can make life easier, more efficient, more manageable, bigger harvest. Yes. And last but not least, I will always be persistent, resilient, and I will be kind to myself. Life happens. You cannot control the weather, but you're just going to do your best. You're going to keep moving it forward. And yes, be kind to yourself because gardening is supposed to be fun. Gardening is supposed to be enjoyable. And if it's not fun and enjoyable, then why are you going to keep doing it? Yes, you can grow pounds of food. Yes, you can save money. Yes, you can grow organic and be healthier. But at the end of the day, for your health, for your wallet, if you're miserable doing this, then you gotta shake it up. So I will continue to be kind to myself. I hope you are kind to yourself. I hope you're enjoying all these tips, and I would love to hear what you want to do differently this coming year. What's gonna make this coming gardening year successful so that you can have the garden of your dreams right here in the Sunshine State. And if you're looking to lay out your plan using tons of tips and ideas on what to grow and when to grow it, you can go ahead and pick up your Wild Floridian Garden Planner right here. And if you want to know the specific varieties of what I grew in my vegetable garden, you can check out this video right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.